This is Strictly Business, presented by the Greater Bakersfield Chamber of Commerce. Sponsored in part by the law offices of Young Wooldridge, San Joaquin Community Hospital. And now, here's your host, Cindy Pollard, President and CEO of the Greater Bakersfield Chamber of Commerce.
Welcome back. I'm joined now by Robin Paggi of Worklogic HR, who's going to tell you the do's and the don'ts of that holiday party. 'Tis the season, so good morning, Robin.
Good morning.
So, should they or should not they host a party?
One of the reasons that employers should is to reward employees. It's the end of the year usually, if we're talking about holiday parties. And it's a good time to thank people for the hard work they put in during that year. Now, one of the reasons they should not is because of all the liability that goes along with hosting a party.
Okay, but there are several things that can be done to party responsibly, I guess?
Yes.
Okay. So what are some of the risks that can arise from a holiday party? And I guess we probably should clarify, we're talking about this during the holiday season, but this would go for company-sponsored parties year-round, correct?
That's
Okay.
correct. So again, the biggest risk is just liability. And there was a case a couple of years ago where an employee went to a work party at the workplace. An overabundance of alcohol was served.
Oops.
The employee drove home, got home, but he took another employee with him who was intoxicated. So he decided to drive that employee to her place. And in doing so, he got into an accident and killed the other driver.
Ooh.
So he went to prison for that. But the parents of the other driver sued the company.
Oh.
And the court found in their favor because they found that attending the Christmas party was in his best interest to mingle with his coworkers and to celebrate the work that they had done. And that it was the employer's fault that he got so intoxicated.
Wow.
And so even though he had gone home and then left again, the court said, no, the reason that he was so intoxicated was because of the company party, that the company benefited from him attending, and so therefore company liable.
Wow. So I guess two questions would come out of that. One would be holiday parties or any office party is not mandatory. Does that change things at all?
In this case, it did not.
It did not. Could it have? Conceivably? I mean, I guess who knows, right?
Right. In this case, it was voluntary. People were not expected to attend.
Okay.
But what the court found is that the employer benefited when employees attended
Right.
by building camaraderie with each other, which led to nice feelings about the employer.
Okay.
And so even though it was not mandatory, the fact that the employer allowed the employee to drink so much, knew that he was intoxicated as he left the building, and allowed him to drive home was what did it for him.
Okay, so do you set limits or, company, buys you one, anything else is on you?
Yes, absolutely.
What's the guidance
and
on
this
that?
court made several suggestions. One, this employee happened to smuggle in alcohol to the event. And so the employer was serving just beer and wine. So that's a good thing to do, to just serve beer and wine. Okay. And they suggested having a policy or letting employees know, don't smuggle in your own alcohol.
Right.
Even if they do smuggle it in, at least they have been warned
Right.
not to do so.
Right.
Having a limit on how many drinks employees can drink. And so, for example, if you're going to buy the drinks, the employer, which is one of the things that you probably shouldn't do, but if you're going to buy a round or two, give employees 1 or 2 drink tickets, and then after that, they're done.
That's it.
But the better way to avoid is to have them buy their own drinks, and that way the employer is not suggesting that they drink whatsoever. Having a paid bartender there, and in the case that I talked about where the employer was found liable, one of the reasons is because it was at their workplace. And the bartender who was serving knew the employee. And so even though they were only serving beer and wine, that bartender served him whiskey. And so that was one of the things too. So have paid bartenders who are monitoring people's consumption, who are not serving people when they've had too much to drink, who are making sure that minors are not drinking.
Good point.
So all of those things, making sure there's lots of food available that people can soak up, and lots of bread and that kind of food.
And non-alcoholic
And
options as
non-alcoholic beverages, having plenty of those as well. And so those are all things that the court suggested that they do, and so those are things I suggest employers do.
What about making transportation available?
That's one of the things
employees?
too, is if you've got somebody who's drinking a lot, make sure they get a taxi. It's much cheaper to pay for that taxi than it is to pay for a lawsuit.
Absolutely.
Don't allow employees to drive company cars to workplace events like this. And that's another thing, too. If they're driving the company car, then you are encouraging them or allowing them to drive that company car after they imbibe. So don't allow that either.
Okay, good points. So oftentimes with the party comes the alcohol, comes inappropriate behavior.
Usually.
Someone decides to do something silly with a copy machine or, swing from a lampshade or dance on a table or something like that. What should you do about inappropriate behavior?
Well, address it immediately. And this is one of the reasons.
Like during the party?
During the party.
Okay.
This is one of the reasons that it's not fun to be an HR person, because you're always on duty, especially at company parties.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, I have a group of friends who have nicknamed me Buzzkill, because I'm the one who kills the buzz at the company parties. So the reason to address it immediately is because if it gets out of hand, such as sexual harassment, talking about inappropriate things in at the event, that kind of thing. If you allow it to continue, that's going to make the situation worse.
Okay.
And the thing that employees need to remember is that your behavior at a company party can come back to bite you when you go back to work.
Absolutely.
People need to know that just because they're at a company party doesn't mean that they don't have to be on their best behavior. It is a work event, even though they're not getting paid for being there.
Okay.
And so that's one of the reasons to address it immediately, is because you let it go, and that's going to lead to bigger problems.
Okay. Well, that raises another question. If there is inappropriate behavior, such as sexual harassment or something like that, that takes place at a party, does that then go back and become a notation to the employee's file of such, or do you let it slide because it occurred?
No,
So
absolutely
that
not.
becomes, okay.
Yes. Phyllis Diller once said, one of the things I hate about company parties is having to look for work the next day. And that absolutely can happen.
Okay.
Yes, employers should discipline employees for inappropriate behavior at the workplace. Yes, it's a write-up. It goes into the file, and the employee is warned. When you come to a workplace event, you've got to remember that even though you're not getting paid and even though it's voluntary, you've got to abide by workplace policies.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about allowing employees to bring guests to holiday parties? Good
Usually
idea, bad idea?
Yeah, usually a good idea. And one of the reasons for that is people seem to be on better behavior when they've got a spouse around.
Okay.
Not always, but a lot of times. But one of the things that employees need to know also is that if your guest gets out of hand, that the employer is going to possibly discipline you for that as well. And so employees need to remember that their guests need to behave appropriately. And if the guest is misbehaving, the employer should take action at the party.
Okay. Interesting. Are there dress codes for holiday parties?
Well, there should be.
Okay.
So employers can certainly set a dress code, yes. And I would encourage them to do so, because people sometimes have their own idea of what is appropriate and inappropriate behavior that might not mesh with the employer's idea of what's appropriate. And so, it's a good idea sometimes for employers to remind everybody, again, that this is a formal event or this is a casual event, but be sure to dress appropriately.
Wear all of your clothes.
Wear all of your clothes. That's
Right.
always a good idea.
Okay, so you mentioned one of the hardest parts about being the HR person is that you're on the clock and you're the buzzkill, so
Right.
you're working. Would you recommend that companies have a designated patrol or party monitor? To call party fouls, or
a good idea to do so, and let your HR person off for the evening, so they don't have to be the one who does it. But somebody should be monitoring, and especially as people are leaving the work or the event, to make sure they're not intoxicated so that they can't drive.
Okay.
So that's a good idea.
That is great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being with us this morning. Lots of things to keep in mind as we're heading into the holiday season, and
Yeah.
hopefully some things to keep some companies out of hot water.
I hope so. And if they get in hot water, they can always give me a call.
Give you a call. Thanks, Robin.
Thank you.
I'm Cindy Pollard with the Greater Bakersfield Chamber of Commerce. You're watching Strictly Business. We're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsors. And when we come back, we'll be talking to the American Red Cross about disaster preparedness and emergency preparedness for your business. Stay with us.